There's one particular circumstance that's fascinated me for years now, and it's the epitome of what we've been doing here as people, and that is the situation of the courtroom. Because in the courtroom, you're trying to get to the truth, yes, but you have these two opposing sides who are recounting and interpreting objective events in two opposite directions, and you're trying to persuade a jury of your peers that your interpretation is the right one. You have these events, this thing that was etched into time, and it was a crime. And a good criminal tries to undo what's been etched to the best of his ability. He tries to erase or obscure or get rid of the evidence that reveals what happened. And the detectives try to find the evidence, and they follow the evidence, and they bring it to a courtroom. They bring it to a prosecutor, and a skilled prosecutor, I would like to say, is objective, but of course he isn't, nor is the defense attorney, obviously. But you have this fascinating situation where this objective thing happened, and there's two completely opposing, two completely opposite directions, guilty or innocent. This person either did or did not do this thing. And a very talented defense attorney can take these events, these discovered little patches that reveal what was etched into time, and interpret it in a different way that benefits his client. Now, the truth is the truth, obviously, but we would save ourselves a lot of time if somehow everything was recorded somewhere in some database and we could just pull it up and, you know. And technically that does happen because the events that are etched into time are recorded into reality, into the natural world around us. The data, the information that reveals what's happened is present in our current surroundings and is present in you. When you wake up in the morning, the evidence of every action that you've ever taken is present in you, in your memory, in your room, in your house. And if you had amnesia, when you woke up in the morning, you could deduce what sort of person you've been based off of the snapshot of your environment, of what you've done. And we do that all the time. Technically, we're always like a defense attorney or a prosecutor all the time. We're either advocating on behalf of ourselves or somebody else, or we're investigating somebody else, or we're suspicious of somebody else. We're always trying to get to the truth. We're trying to get to that just raw, objective series of events that was etched into time without the obscurity and the confusing and disorganizing effects of a persuasive person. If your client is dead to rights guilty, a talented attorney will disorganize the evidence and reinterpret it in a very plausible way. And statistically, things will happen. There's a statistical probability for anything that could happen, but a talented, intelligent person always bends probability in the direction that they need it to go. Talent is a very underrated thing. If you've been playing basketball for 30 years and you're very, very good at basketball, you greatly increase the probability that when you shoot a shot, it'll go in. You're bending probability towards towards your aims. If you've taken a course, if you've studied, you're increasing the probability that whatever field you studied and you enter into that field, you will find some success there. Obviously, that's the premise of how we do everything. And here in the United States, we live in a special time, very special time, because the word of the day is stability. The fact that we all know that everybody's going to go to bed at night, wake up the next day, go to work, and do their thing is the reason why things are done so frequently and but at such a high volume with such conviction is because of the stability of this system we've created here. You don't invest in an area that you know war is coming or that is war torn. And we've managed to set up this remarkably stable entity out here. I don't think we give it enough credit. Remarkably stable compared to historical examples, even compared to present day examples. We know that when we elect a new leader for the executive branch, there will be a transfer of power and we'll never worry about it. Somebody new is elected, we go to bed at night, and it never crosses our mind that anything could go wrong. It's just so normal and so stable. Versus a king or some sort of dictator who has to worry about succession. Every 40 years, you have this scramble for power. You have reliability in the laws and the application of the laws. You have routine plus spontaneity. And it's a very, very powerful combination. And a courtroom is also a microcosm of that stability. We've all seen it thousands and thousands of times. We know the procedures. We know how it goes. But within that stability, there is so much room for new all the time. And it's interesting how the present right now, the things going on now, in time become knowledge. Right now we're acting on behalf of and because of the combined sum of everything we know, everything we are, everything we've ever said and done. We act with the force of that. But it isn't necessarily knowledge until later, until we can look back on what's been etched and interpret it. And it's fascinating. And we've gotten to the point where we write things down. It's not just oral, which is the next level of knowledge. And then teaching it is the next level. And then teaching it in a way that cultivates expertise is the next level. And it's interesting how we call political movements, social movements. It goes back to the way we describe emotions and social activities in terms of motion. A revolution is a cycle. When a revolution occurs in a country, it's another way of saying the cycle is going. There's all sorts of revolutions, all sorts of spins around, over and over and over again, around and around. Things are very circular. That's the basic shape. It's a circle, obviously. Now, as a human being, you'll notice throughout your life, something will grab you. Something specific and particular will grab you. And more than likely, it'll become your either your field of study or your profession. And as you go, as you accrue knowledge, ability, and talent, you are curbing everything related to that profession, to that interest, towards you. It almost becomes an ever increasing center of gravity. We love watching very talented people do what they do at the peak of their ability. We love watching Michael Jordan. When that man was playing in the 90s, he was living art. He was an artist on the basketball court. And that's really what set him apart. You know, there's a lot of other guys who were great and put up great numbers, but there was something about the way Jordan played. And he even said it every night. He said that he played as if there was a new fan of his out there in the stands who had never seen him. And it was their first game, and he was going to play for that person. We love watching that level of talent in anything, even a cook, a chef, you know. But there are some human beings, I can't quite think of the word, there might not be a word for it, but human beings, there's some human beings who are just almost universally good human beings. They're very skilled at being human beings. They're good speakers, they're good listeners, they give good insight, they listen very, very well, not in just a way that involves absorbing information to respond, but they listen in a way that involves a much deeper level of learning, where information is being absorbed by such a person and it's changing everything else that they know in real time, like a stream of water. And the odds of certain things are very low. They're very low. But people do things all the time that are extremely unlikely. And you could even say the odds of people being here in the first place is pretty low. But here we are. I say that for anything that does happen, it had a 100% chance of happening. The things you need for a good living organism on Earth is for the most part shared among the living things on Earth. For the most part, the creatures here consume, digest, extract, and excrete. Most living creatures on Earth have the exact same sort of functioning. And living things are not unlike what we would call non-living things. They also absorb released waste and use what they absorb to grow. It's a universal that things that exist in this universe will absorb other things in this universe, discard what isn't, let's call, compatible, and they'll use what they absorb to change into something new. Like human beings have a real chance, you know. We have a real chance at going beyond the expectation because, I don't know, it seems like the general sentiment of people is that they expect humans to fail, you know. There's a sort of pessimism about humanity. And I don't know if everybody's meant to be an intellectual. I don't know if everybody is meant to, you know, absorb a lot of history because a lot of bad things have happened. People have done some pretty bad things. And in that light, one is quick to judge humanity based off of a subjective interpretation of objective events that we could never take place, we could never be part of. I always say that everything we need to know about the human condition is present in each individual human. One doesn't necessarily need to look into history or to look into their peers or to study other people to find out what a human being is, to find the true depths and the true reaches and the true nature of a person. Every person carries that information in them. Everybody. And there are certain conclusions that are available to us all the time. And I used to think that everybody could be like a sage or a philosopher type, but I don't think that anymore. I don't. Not all people are meant to be like that. Not all people are meant to be wise. Not all people are meant to be outgoing. Not all people are meant to be talented. But each and every single human being, for each thing that they say and do, has a much, much larger effect on the grand scheme than we may initially assume. Especially now because of the internet. We don't know what single sentence or single set of words somebody's going to read and stick with them forever. Sometimes a set of words to one person is meaningless, and to another it changes their life. And there's just such a wide range of different types of human beings that contribute to the human experience in different ways. There are a great many, many people who will never be able to articulate their own condition. But by the way they live, they provide information, they provide very, very valuable intellectual resource to those who are able to observe, extract, and interpret in a way that adds to the body of wisdom. Like, people act out wisdom. There's been women that I've met who say things and do things, and I remember quite a few times thinking to myself, like, how is she that wise? Like, how, you know, like women I've just met, they say things and their, you know, behavior is in such a way I'm like, I'm nowhere near that wise. But at the same time, I'm extremely wise. Like, people who are not philosophically inclined, don't care about philosophy and never will, act in ways and behave in ways that is wise. It's funny how it is. So, we often underrate, at least I did for most of my life, words. And that's not a, you know, open door to be hypersensitive. Um, but imagine, imagine a world without words. In the Bible, it specifically tells us that we should name everything. Everything needs to have a name. And when I was younger, I thought that was kind of, I don't know what that meant. I just thought, yeah, no kidding. But I didn't realize how important that is. Like, the name of something is supposed to capture it and grab all of its complexity and fit it into one word, like cow or tree or Martha, you could spend your entire life examining each cell and atom of a cow or a tree or Martha, but you would die far before you got to the end. And how impractical is that? So, words are combined sums, and then you chain them together into other combined sums to make another larger combined sum. And I always used to wonder if it's possible to be a lawyer, be an attorney, and have absolutely no knowledge of the actual law itself. You're just a very persuasive person. Would you be effective as a defense attorney just as a persuasive person, just by having a look at the evidence, getting to know the defendant, getting to know the case, and trying your best to come up with an alternative interpretation for the evidence? Once I realized that we're capable of doing that persuasively, it makes it to where nothing is out of bounds. It makes it to where out here in the real world, that's going on all the time. We are our own defendant. We are the person, the main person that we're always the most interested in progressing, moving forward, or getting ahead. So the things that we say and do are always going to have a slant towards ourselves. And if we didn't, then obviously nothing substantial would ever really happen. There's a certain degree of, I don't know if we can call it selfishness, but you could call it selfishness that's required. But there's also a certain level of intelligence that's required that knows when and to what degree to be selfish, when and to what degree to be selfless. If you're a purely empathetic creature and all you do is experience the ups and downs of who's before you, you will not do well in life. You will always suffer because there's billions of people and only one of you. There's billions, infinite stories, there's infinite tragedies, infinite ups, and there's only one of you. So, I've met people who are very, very empathetic, and it can be a virtue. But all things, everything, is has a ceiling. And once you cross that ceiling, you start to breach into unhealthy territory to where it starts to disorganize you and disassemble you, and you begin to lose yourself. All things have a threshold. Cheeseburgers, ice cream, even oxygen, water, everything has a threshold. Everything has a nice, medium, perfect amount that in the right doses is peak health, optimum. But at the same time, things aren't so black and white. There's also fuzzy, wiggly, and gray all through that. But within this, we're obviously our own advocate, you could say. But we also have people that we like. There's people around us who strike us a certain way, and we want them around. And we also are advocates on their behalf. So we will bend things toward them as well, and our family, and our kids, our husbands and wives. That's our eternal situation, balancing the objective, the things that these people that we care about do, and things that outsiders do in an objective way, and balancing our subjective view against it. Because there's always a part of us that has, it's like I said in the last video, there is this thing deep, deep down inside that we all have in common. It's sort of the silent witness that's always there, that is, never speaks a word, never has a thought. It is the space where thoughts skitter across and words are heard, but it's just there, watching, observing. It's the same thing that all things share. It's the organizing force behind reality itself. And that always stays sort of separate and bound at the same time. It's that thing that we protect the most. And the thing about lying too, like I said, it's not a it's not a wise strategy to lie. I mean, you may have to in very, very dire situations, but there's a there's a huge amount of reality that's left uninterpreted. Make that your lie. Things that you will never think about, never have to consider. Things you'll never worry about, whether you have to tell the truth or not, or lie about. Make that just a giant blank space of all that you don't pay attention to in mind. Make that the area where things that are untrue are allowed to exist. But as far as the path that you actually etch, the words that you actually say, and whether or not they do a good job of representing reality is crucial in what you actually end up etching into time. It's the most important thing. The most important thing in a human life is a human's ability to accurately represent events within that human being and around that human being as accurately as possible. The more accurate you are, and the more words that you have for reality itself, the better and easier and just all around more amazing your life is going to be. And I'm not trying to be some kind of self-help guy. This is just the state of affairs. The worse you are at representing reality and translating it into words and thinking about it in words and talking about it in words, the more difficult it's going to be for you. If your ability to interpret has shown to be out of whack, incorrect, out of tune, consistently, over and over and over again, then you have to do something about that sooner rather than later. It's the most important thing. Because that's the primary channel that human beings exist in. It is experiencing, utilizing the combined sum of what we know in action, in words, in the present, and letting that later become knowledge. And then later, we can tell the story of what happened and even tell the moral of the story. We can tell the story in a way that is concise, picks the right events, picks the right actions, picks the right words from the story, and tells it in a way that transmits it in a way that when you hear it, you feel it, you understand it, you get it, and you actually enjoy it. But we don't have to worry about knowledge as we are acting. We don't have to worry about knowledge necessarily in general human affairs for the future either. Because it's like I said, you can absorb knowledge ad infinitum, but you will behave spontaneously. So you may as well just, save yourself the time and effort. The knowledge that you should be going after is the stuff that calls to you, you know. And it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's stupid. It doesn't matter if it's like, you know, information about people instead of ideas. It doesn't make you a better or worse person. It just makes you that sort of person who's more interested in people. What I was saying earlier about some women that I've met, some women that I've met are beautiful, beautiful women, intelligent women who have some of the most and best psychological understanding than anybody I've ever met. Because a lot of women that I've met have basically seen it all. They've seen every type of man, every type of woman, and I don't know why this seems more particular to women. They're very good at nuance. They're very good at understanding a huge amount about a person and a social situation with very little information, basically just by looking at somebody. That's what I meant by this just insane amount of wisdom. And I'm pretty good at observing and seeing and understanding people, but there are some people out there who are just, you know, I've never seen anything like it. It's just impressive. And honestly, I don't even know what to compliment. What are you going to say? Like, you're a really good human. You're good at humaning. It's like, yeah. So you don't know how the things that interest you are going to benefit you later. You just don't. Um, so if something does truly interest you and it doesn't hurt people and it's not a crime and, it doesn't bring suffering into the world, then drift towards that at whatever speed feels right, because you just don't know the benefits that are there, because there's a reason why our internal mechanism points us in these directions. There's a reason why we feel that feeling of interest. It's not just random and it's not stupid. It's the exact opposite. And once you follow those things and those people and those places, all these things in life, once you follow it, interact with it, mess with it a little bit, and then settle into it, that's when you start to feel that feeling of synergy, because it will branch into other things that you didn't know you were branching into at the time, which will branch into other things that you could have never planned, never predicted, never seen coming. And that's how it goes. When you're doing that, you're nestled in the river, in the channel, and you feel like you're in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. And I know that feeling so well. It's a beautiful feeling. It's one of the best feelings that you can feel as a person. You just feel at home, you know. And you know that feeling. It's when it's something that's just so interesting, it becomes so important that it is your life. It becomes your life. It becomes you. And you become it. And really gifted attorneys, like I was saying, have that element when you're watching them. You know, you already have it in your mind somewhere. You have your own judgment about their client. You think maybe that they're guilty. The evidence obviously shows they're guilty. But this attorney is a genius, and they're loving it. Believe me, they are loving it. There's nowhere else they want to be, and they make amazing money because people love watching it, and the high stakes and the actual fruit that's bore off of being able to bend statistics so hard in favor of the person who paid for it. When you go to a lawyer, you're basically saying, Can you bend statistics? Can you bend probability towards me? You don't have to lie. All you have to do is tell my story, is what people say. Tell them my truth. And the role of a good defense attorney is to take that objective series of events and add as much subjectivity to it as humanly possible. It is to saturate it with subjectivity and sort of put a huge blemish on the idea of objectivity. And it's the role of the prosecutor to be as objective as possible, but if they notice that they're scant on the evidence, like they haven't found much evidence, then there's not much to be objective about. Then you have to rely on the subjective and interpreting and telling a story. I mean, imagine that. You're in this room where everybody's telling the truth. Everybody's telling the truth. And this is a situation that's highly specialized and finely tuned for discovering and telling the truth about something that happened. Like, this is the apex in a courtroom where you have months of investigation, months of organizing, months of planning, and now these words are to be said to represent the combined sum of all those efforts. And the truth is now being said for the jurors who have to decide. They have to decide what objectively happened. They have to carve themselves and weave through all the subjective, all the great stories about what kind of person they are, all the cherry-picked good deeds, all the witnesses who will say this person could never commit a crime. Because remember, with each different person we know, there's a totally different chemical makeup, a totally different chemistry, a totally different bond, totally different relationship. You got a guy murdering somebody on one side and then, in love with another, and absolutely no harm or violence whatsoever on the other side. So, yeah, and to think that that's what we used to rely on more than anything. DNA is a good way to say, hey, look, this is objective, this is, it's hard to throw subjective onto something like DNA. The only real way to add subjectivity to that is to question the level of corruption within the police, the possibility of planting that evidence. And yeah, that's what we've been doing over time. We've been trying to find out how to explain events as objectively as possible, and it keeps getting finer and finer and finer. But like I said, a good attorney, good defense attorney, knows how to weave that subjective in there. I remember in the Bible, I always end up talking about God. I promise it's not planned. It's just what happens. In the Bible, not only does it say that God is a jealous God, but also vengeful. And when I hear things like that, I don't think to myself, man, God is, petty. I think he has the same brain that we do. He thinks and interprets and views reality through the same basic formula, method, the same basic screening that we do. So when you understand something, when you feel something, when something happens to you, this architect who created all things, who set the stage, which allowed the circumstances to come to fruition to make you and me possible. Understand that entity completely understands your plight, your situation. Totally and completely. And if you were to talk to God, he would be able to perfectly represent reality and words. He wouldn't miss anything because this is his body. And the scheme was set in motion so long ago, and we've done so much with this scheme so far. And sometimes I say to God, I say, I hope you're pleased with us in general. I hope overall, you're happy with what we're doing down here. You know, I hope you're good with this. And I say thank you for setting up this circumstance which allowed me to exist. You know, allowed myself to come to be. And I do wonder how much subjectivity such a God would overlay into his interpretation of reality. You know, his ability to explain why he did things, the motivation for certain things, would be premium information. And that's the thing about human beings. We are infinitely smart, we are infinitely intelligent. We just have to know how something is done. And once we know how it's done, then we know it. Then we understand it. If an alien spaceship were to land here on Earth and it had some crazy technology, that was just well beyond us, and the alien could explain all of its tech to us, we would be like, oh, okay, I completely understand. You know, it's just that we don't know. But once we do know, we're very good at understanding something and digesting it. We just need the explanation. It's like with the atom bomb. It's you would have never guessed that such a thing was possible. You know that is alien technology. Jet engines is alien technology. Our cell phones is definitely alien technology to the human beings of 2,500 years ago. But if you explained it to them thoroughly, they would say, "Oh, I see. Yeah." You would have to explain more and more elements of it. You would have to explain that air is even able to be compressed to be put through a jet engine. You'd have to explain what gas is. You'd have to have more words said, more things represented in order to get them to that eureka moment. But you'd get them there for sure. And it's the same thing with things that are yet to be discovered. And there's that old Chinese saying, "May you live in interesting times," and I think we certainly are living in extremely interesting times.